Welcome back, everybody, to our deep dive into E2E Networks. They are definitely a company to watch in India's AI revolution. And for this one, we're going deep into their Q3FY25 earnings conference call transcript. I mean, it is a little dense, but we're going to pull out all the good stuff and try to figure out, like how their business model works, what they're thinking about for the future, and what risks they might face.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating look into how a company operates in like such a fast-paced and, really competitive environment.
Yeah, and they're playing in a space with some serious, high stakes here. They've raised over 1,000 crore rupees to fuel their growth.
Wow.
That's over 120 million US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And they're even partnering with Larsen and Toubro, which is a major construction giant in India, to try to tap into that enterprise market. So it's a pretty curious pairing.
It is. It's I think it really shows how much AI is influencing all these different industries, even construction L&T, they probably see AI as the key to, innovating and being more efficient in the future. And E2E is right there, ready to provide the infrastructure to make that happen.
Right. Yeah. So let's kind of break down their core business model a little bit. They're really focused on, providing that high-powered computing, the infrastructure that AI development needs, like those really powerful GPUs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the hardware. They're creating this whole cloud platform that includes, virtual machines and storage and all those networking solutions.
Oh, this is the whole package deal.
Yeah, basically everything a company needs to build, train, and then actually deploy AI models all in one place.
And they mentioned that they have a massive deployment of those H100 GPUs. So why are those so important?
Those are the workhorses, the engines of AI training. The H100 is NVIDIA's latest and greatest GPU. It's designed specifically for those crazy complex AI computations they need. And it allows for, faster and more efficient training of all those cutting edge AI models.
So if a company is really at the forefront of AI development, these H100s are basically giving them, the keys to the fast lane.
Exactly. And the fact that E2E has managed to get so many of them shows how committed they are to getting those really high demand clients, those clients that are pushing the limits of what's possible with AI.
But it doesn't sound like it's all, roses and sunshine, right? They're sort of grappling with this balance between the unpredictable nature of AI training and the need for predictable revenue.
Yeah, that's the big challenge, right? For anyone in this space, AI training, it can be really bursty. Demand goes up and down all the time, Yeah, one day a company might need tons of computing power to train this new model. And then as soon as it's done, they scale way back. It's this constant, push and pull.
Right. It looks like that actually impacted their Q3 revenue. It dipped a bit.
Yeah, and they said that was because of client churn. So basically, customers finished their training cycles, and then they reduced how much they were using, which really shows you how volatile this market can be. It's hard to keep growing steadily when the demand is so unpredictable.
Okay, so how are they planning to deal with this challenge?
Well, they're expanding like crazy. They're building this new data center in Chennai on top of the ones they already have in Delhi and Mumbai.
So they're kind of spreading their bets geographically, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it actually accomplishes a couple of things. One, it lets them handle way more clients and those bursty workloads, and two, it helps them target those bigger enterprise clients that they're going after with that L&T partnership. Mm-hmm. Bigger companies, they need more capacity and they need reliability, and that geographically diverse infrastructure can help them with that.
Right. So it's kind of the two-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Mitigating that risk and expanding their reach to, a more stable customer base.
Yeah.
But let's talk about those enterprise level clients, the big fish. How are they planning to attract them?
So it looks like they're shifting gears a little bit. They're moving away from their current base of mostly SMEs and startups, and they're focusing more on these larger organizations.
So they're thinking big.
Yeah. And that means, adapting their services and their support to meet those specific needs of enterprise clients.
Right. So it's not just about the hardware anymore. It's building those, really tailored solutions.
Yeah.
And giving that high touch support that those enterprise clients expect.
Exactly. And, it's a smart move. Startups are great for early adoption and innovation. But to really grow, you need those big contracts with those established companies. And it seems like E2E, they get that.
So they're thinking long term.
Mm-hmm.
But to attract those, big players, they've got to stay on top of the tech curve.
Yeah.
Right? How are they making sure they don't get left behind?
Well, they're super excited about NVIDIA's next generation Blackwell GPUs, and they plan on adding them to their infrastructure as soon as they can get their hands on them. So, they're constantly investing in that cutting edge hardware, and that's key in a field like AI that's always changing so fast.
It's like they're in this constant, arms race to keep up with AI development. And it's intense. But speaking of competition, how are they planning to stand out, in a market that's getting more and more crowded?
Now, that's where things get interesting. The AI cloud market is getting super competitive with those global giants, like AWS and Google Cloud. They all want a piece of the pie. So E2E has to find a way to stand out to create their own little niche.
So how do you think they'll do that? What makes them unique?
Well, one big advantage they have is their focus on the Indian market. They understand the needs and the challenges of Indian businesses better than those global players, and they're building their infrastructure and services with that in mind. Think about it. They have that local expertise. They know how to navigate the local regulations, and they already have those relationships with Indian companies. That's huge in a market that's growing so fast.
Right. It's like they're the local guide in a foreign country. They know all the best spots. But even with those advantages, there are some pretty big risks they have to face, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we'll definitely dive into those. But you know what? I think we're on a roll here. Let's just keep going. What's the first risk that pops into your mind?
Well, they're really relying on NVIDIA, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've basically built their whole business around one company's technology. So what happens if, something happens with that relationship? Or if NVIDIA, has a bad quarter or something?
Right. It's like building your house on someone else's land. Any disruption in that supply chain, a change in NVIDIA's strategy, or even if a competitor comes out with something better, could really impact E2E's business.
And then there's those new US GPU export rules to think about. How much of a threat do you think those are?
That's a tough one. It's like a wild card. Those regulations are meant to control the flow of, advanced technology, and they could definitely make it harder for E2E to get those high-end GPUs, especially those H100s and the new Blackwell architecture.
Right. It's like this sword hanging over their head. So how are they dealing with that threat?
They're keeping a close eye on the situation and trying to figure out ways to minimize the risk. Maybe they diversify their hardware sources or look into different technologies or even focus on specific AI areas where those export rules aren't as strict.
So it's a real balancing act, navigating those geopolitical risks and trying to stay ahead of the tech curve at the same time. It sounds like they need to be pretty nimble to pull this off.
No doubt. But, they've shown they can adapt, and they're not afraid to change direction when they need to. And that might be their biggest strength as they navigate, this super complex and constantly evolving AI landscape.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from their business model and their expansion plans to the challenges of that unpredictable demand and, the looming threat of all that competition. So where do we go from here?
I think let's shift gears a little bit and look at E2E's long-term vision. What are they doing not just to survive, but to really thrive in this competitive market? What's their master plan for shaping the future of AI in India?
Now, that's a question I want the answer to. Let's dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive into E2E Networks. Stick around.
It seems like they're aiming to be more than just an infrastructure provider. They want to be a catalyst for AI innovation in India.
Okay, that's interesting. How are they going to do that?
Yeah.
What's their strategy doing more than just a company that provides powerful computers?
Well, they're building a whole ecosystem. They've developed their own AML platform. They call it TIR, and it's designed to streamline the entire process of developing AI, from building and training models all the way to deploying them and managing them.
It's such like a one-stop shop for AI. They're not just giving you the raw computing power. They're also giving you the tools and the support to make developing AI easier and more accessible.
Exactly. And by offering this, comprehensive platform, they're trying to lower the barrier to entry for businesses in India, especially those that might not have the resources or the know-how to build their own AI infrastructure from scratch.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like they're providing the foundation for India's AI ambitions.
Right.
Allowing companies to focus on building the cool stuff, the applications that'll really push the industry forward.
Right. It's a pretty compelling vision. They're not just reacting to the market. They're trying to shape it by creating an environment where AI can really take off.
But can they really compete with those big global players? You're the ones that are also pouring tons of money into AI platforms and ecosystems. How do they make sure they don't get overshadowed by, like AWS or Google Cloud?
That's the million-dollar question, right? They're definitely going up against some heavy hitters.
Yeah.
But I think there are a few things that could give them an edge.
Like what? What are their secret weapons?
Well, first, they have that deep understanding of the Indian market that we talked about. They know the challenges and the opportunities here better than anyone else, and that lets them tailor their services in a way that those global players just can't.
It's like they're the local chef who knows exactly what their customers want, right?
Exactly. Second, they're really good at building partnerships, not just with companies like L&T, but also with universities, research institutions, startups. They get that building a thriving AI ecosystem means collaborating and having a shared vision.
So it's all about creating that sense of community, that network of people all working towards the same goal.
Exactly. And finally, they have to stay focused on innovation. They can't just rest on their laurels. They need to keep pushing the boundaries, explore new technologies, and develop new services to stay ahead of the curve.
It's like surfing. You got to keep adjusting to stay on top of the wave.
Perfect analogy. And in this case, that wave is AI technology. E2E needs to be adaptable and quick on their feet to ride that wave successfully.
Okay, so they're building an ecosystem, they're making friends, and they're constantly innovating. But we still have to talk about that elephant in the room, their reliance on NVIDIA. How can they reduce that risk in the long run?
Well, they've mentioned that they might partner with other hardware providers in the future. Diversifying their supply chain is really important if they don't want to be completely dependent on one company.
So spreading the love a little bit.
Yeah.
But what about those U.S. export regulations? Could those really mess things up?
It's definitely a risk they need to manage carefully. If they can't get those high-end GPUs, they'll have to get creative.
What kind of creative solutions are we talking about?
Well, they might have to focus on AI applications that don't need the absolute latest and greatest hardware, or maybe they start developing their own specialized AI chips, or even partner with other countries or companies that aren't as affected by those export rules.
It sounds like they're going to need a good mix of, practical thinking and ingenuity to deal with all of this.
For sure. It's a complex situation with a lot of moving parts, but one thing's clear. E2E isn't afraid of a challenge. They're tackling these issues head-on with ambition and a willingness to adapt.
So we've got a company with a bold vision, a clear strategy, and a realistic view of the obstacles ahead. But what does all this mean for the future of AI in India?
That's the big question, isn't it? If E2E can pull this off, they could be a major force in India's AI revolution.
Right. They could be the platform that helps Indian businesses embrace AI, leading to more innovation and economic growth across all kinds of industries.
They could attract the best talent support, cutting-edge research, and really put India on the map as a global AI leader. But there's also the chance that they could stumble, that the challenges might be too much to overcome.
So there are a few different ways this story could end. Which path will they take? Will they rise to the occasion and become a catalyst for real change? Or will they get lost in the shadow of those global giants? Only time will tell.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. We're watching a company at a pivotal moment, a company that could shape the future of an entire industry. It's a story that's still being written, and we get to see how it unfolds.
That's why I love doing these deep dives. We get to explore these complex and dynamic stories, unpack all the details, and really understand the forces that are shaping our world.
And hopefully it sparks some interesting conversations and makes our listeners think about these issues in new ways.
And speaking of our listeners, what are your thoughts on E2E's goals? Do you think they have what it takes to succeed? Share your insights in the comments. And join us for the final part of our deep dive into E2E Networks, where we'll explore what their journey could mean, not just for India, but for the global AI landscape. So we've talked about E2E's, big plans and the challenges they're facing, but now I think it's time to zoom out a little, look at the bigger picture and think about the ripple effects of all this.
Yeah, it's like, tossing a rock into a pond.
Yeah.
Those ripples, they spread out way beyond that initial splash. E2E doing well or not doing well could have a big impact, not just in India, but, for the whole global AI scene.
Okay, so I'm imagining those ripples spreading out. What kind of impact are we talking about? Let's start with India. What could E2E's growth mean for their tech sector?
Well, if they can actually make themselves like the main platform for AI development in India, it could really change things. Think about more investment in AI research, a ton of new AI startups popping up, and, more companies across different industries actually using AI.
So it's not just about E2E, being successful. It's like they could create this whole positive feedback loop where their growth helps the entire AI sector in India grow.
Exactly. And that could have a huge impact on the Indian economy. New jobs, more productivity, and maybe even, India becoming more competitive on the global stage.
Right. Like planting a seed that grows into this massive tree, to provide shade and, resources for a whole forest. But what about the global implications?
Yeah.
How could what E2E is doing affect the AI landscape worldwide?
Well, it could, shake things up a bit, challenge those big companies that are already dominating the market. If E2E shows that a smaller company focused on a specific region can still compete and be successful, it might encourage other companies to do the same thing.
So it's like the underdog story. E2E being successful could inspire other underdogs around the world, and that could lead to a more diverse and competitive AI market.
Exactly. And, more competition usually leads to faster innovation, lower prices, and, in the end, more people having access to AI technology.
So it's bigger than just E2E, making money. It's about maybe like changing the whole global AI ecosystem, making it more inclusive and dynamic.
It's a really interesting example of how one company's goals can have these huge consequences, influencing a whole industry and maybe even shifting the balance of power globally.
Right. It reminds us that everything's connected.
Right.
What happens in one place can affect the whole world. And it shows how important it is to pay attention to these, up and coming companies, the ones that are shaking things up and pushing the limits.
It's like watching a revolution unfold, We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's clear that something big is going on, and it has the potential to change everything.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into E2E networks, let's leave our listeners with one final thought. Keep an eye on this company, watch what they do, because their story isn't over yet.
It's a story that's still being written, and it's a story that we're all a part of, whether we realize it or not, because the future of AI is the future of all of us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it, informative and thought-provoking. And as always, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and, keep diving deep into this crazy, complex, and ever-changing world.